And the gag order on former President Trump now partially lifted just 2 days before the first presidential debate. But Trump's team saying that's far from enough, while President Biden is preparing to focus on the economy. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
Former President Trump is now allowed to talk more freely about his conviction, a likely topic at Thursday's debate. Judge Juan in Trump's New York case on Tuesday partially lifted Trump's gag order, allowing him to now talk about jurors and witnesses, including Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. Trump still barred, though, from speaking about court staff and prosecutors. While the gag order is now partially gone, Trump's team is now vowing to immediately challenge Tuesday's order and saying it still gags a leading candidate from speaking freely during the debate. Meanwhile, the White House on Tuesday said President Biden at a debate would focus on issues including immigration and the economy.
Here's how he's going to continue to build on the economy. We're talking about historic numbers in creating jobs.
Another topic that could come up is gun control. Last weekend marks the second weekend in a row of shootings that left dozens of people dead or wounded. In a rare move, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy on Tuesday declared gun-related violence a public health crisis. Murthy says that's to, quote, take this issue out of the realm of politics.
Impact of gun violence is far more far-reaching than we may think.
That's also President Biden's argument when he called for stricter gun laws earlier this month.
Because whether we're Democrats or Republicans, we want our families to be safe.
But gun control inevitably remains a political minefield. Biden in that speech accused Trump of doing too little on gun control, while Trump's been arguing he's defending Second Amendment rights. And that's just one of the many topics that the two candidates are expected to clash over, this time in person at Thursday's debate. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And with U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy today issuing that advisory on firearm-related violence, he declared a public health crisis in the United States. And joining me now to discuss this advisory and his own survival of gun-related violence is Aswad Thomas. Aswad Thomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Of course, Aswad, you suffered a traumatic experience yourself involving gun violence. You were nearly killed when you were shot twice in the back in an attempted robbery before you were scheduled to play a professional basketball game in Europe. The shooting ended your career. Talk to us about your journey, both how you healed physically and through PTSD, nightmares, and what you've learned about the process.
Yeah, for me, 2009, when I became a victim of gun violence, it changed my entire life. But a thing that really, had me thinking about this issue differently was learning during my last doctor's appointment that the teenager who had shot me was also a victim of gun violence as well. And just like me, he was released from that same hospital back into that same community with no access to mental health services and no support. And so I strongly feel like his unaddressed trauma played a huge role in my shooting years later, which led me to working with survivors all across the country through Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice.
Tell us about your work with Alliance for Safety and Justice. How have you worked toward preventing crime, keeping communities safe, and ultimately helping crime victims heal and rehabilitate as you did?
Yeah, first is really excited about today's announcement, right, of declaring gun violence as a public health crisis. As victims of gun violence, we've been urging public officials to really recognize this as a public health crisis for years. Right. We work with a lot of crime survivors across the country. Majority of them do not access victim services. 96% of crime victims do not access the state's victim compensation program, where there are resources to help families heal and recover from violence. So our work at the Alliance for Safety and Justice and Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice is really around bringing together survivors to uplift the safety solutions we know that, one, prevent crime from happening in the first place, but also helps to provide solutions to stopping the cycle of violence. And that includes things like investing in community violence intervention programs, investing in mental health programs, investing in things like trauma recovery centers. Those are the things that have been proven to prevent crime from happening, also to help crime victims heal.
Now, as you mentioned, and as we saw today, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy issuing the office's first advisory on firearm violence and declared firearm violence, as you mentioned, a public health crisis in the United States. How important is this advisory for the victims of gun violence, for their suffering to actually be recognized?
This is historic, a milestone in our country of declaring gun violence as a public health crisis. But many people may not know what that actually means. So let me spend a few minutes talking about when you designate gun violence as a public health crisis. That's letting the public know and letting our public officials know that this is a preventable problem. This is also a curable problem as well. And when you invest in a lot of the solutions that the U.S. Surgeon General outlined in the report, and you add on things like trauma recovery centers, when you add on things like community violence intervention programs, those are the things that help stop the cycle of gun violence in communities. And for decades, how we've worked to address gun violence and crime in this country for years has always been more punishment. But we know by talking directly to crime victims, the things that actually stop gun violence from happening is investing more in community-based organizations and partnering together with public health officials as well.
Aswad Thomas, really appreciate you joining us to share your story and your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate have found common ground in the American Privacy Rights Act. The House is set to mark up the bill, which would minimize online data collection and empower individuals to control their personal information. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
The House's Energy and Commerce Committee will begin the markup of the American Privacy Rights Act this Thursday. The bill was originally drafted by Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell and Republican Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, both the chairwomen of the House and Senate Energy and Commerce Committee, respectively.
73% of adults believe that they have little or no control over their data. Nearly 90% of Americans are concerned about the social media platforms processing personal information about kids.
According to lawmakers, the bill would minimize the data collection of individuals and would also prohibit advertising that targets minors.
Because I don't trust what's happening at all. Our kids scroll. Companies collect nearly every data point imaginable to build profiles on them and keep them addicted. They intentionally target children with dangerous and life-threatening content.
The American Privacy Rights Act would also create a unified federal standard to protect data nationwide.
It provides businesses with certainty through a national preemptive standard, secures individual liberties throughout strong data minimization provisions, and cements America's global leadership through data security provisions that warn consumers when their information is being collected and shared with our foreign adversaries like China and Russia.
Currently, 18 states have data protection laws, which means that businesses and individuals have to navigate 18 different legal frameworks in order to have their data protected nationwide. The markup of the bill this Thursday will most likely tee up a vote before the August recess. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And longtime Democratic, now independent Senator Joe Manchin says he plans to donate his remaining campaign funds to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. A CNN opinion piece, Manchin says he'll use his super PAC to reward those who are committed to bipartisan efforts. So far, he's already expressed support for the re-election bids of independent Senator Angus King of Maine and Democratic Congressman Jared Golden, as well as Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. Manchin said all three of these lawmakers share one thing in common: putting America above politics. He noted that his donations might not change the current system, but said he believes it will send a message to voters, donors, and corporations that they should unite behind bipartisan efforts. Once a Democrat, Manchin declared independence from both political parties just recently, following in the footsteps of his like-minded colleague Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. The West Virginia senator says neither Democrats nor Republicans are willing to find common ground. Manchin announced in November that he will not be seeking re-election this year. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.